Orchard, as I recall, was an acquisition by the Lowe's Corporation, the big, huge hardware supply company, and lots of big buildings and big parking lots, Lowe's. And
Yep.
Orchard was sort of the neighborhood hardware store model, and primarily, I guess, out west, California, and that region of the United States. And you walked into a pretty big turnaround situation there. Describe the situation upon entry and what you were focusing on during your tenure as CEO. What were you trying to do at Orchard?
So Lowe's, very big, very successful company, runs big box stores. Home improvement is the focus. And so you can do small projects, but it's also, optimized for taking on very substantial projects, right? Orchard Supply Hardware was a store, as you say, of neighborhood hardware stores. So Lowe's, a Lowe's store might be like 100,000 square feet or 150, right? An Orchard store would be maybe 20,000 or 25 or 15,000, right? So yeah, different scale. Orchard was founded as a co-op in the 30s in outside of San Jose, where it used to be Orchard Fields, and it was founded as a co-op by farmers in the Great Depression to get through hard times together. And it always had this like very neighborly, very cooperative, helping each other out, member of the neighborhood ethos. We discovered this later. Orchard had been a co-op and then had gone private and then gone public and then private equity and then was owned by Sears for 15 years and then was spun out of Sears by some people who took it public again and then into bankruptcy. And then Lowe's bought it. And I was not part of any of that. Right. So when it was bought over, I mean, it had not been invested in for a long time. A number of the stores were quite run down, the headquarters and everything. After acquisition, again, I was not yet part of this. The first three big things that were done were to remodel half the stores in about an 18-month period, extend the store footprint. So there are about 60 stores primarily clustered around northern central California, extend the footprint up into Oregon, down into Southern California, and across into Florida without doing anything different to the supply chain. So there was one distribution center in Northern California that's now supporting, that very extended footprint of stores, and simultaneously embark upon an ERP implementation.
Yeah.
So these were three very disruptive things that happened in a very short time in a company that's just been acquired out of bankruptcy, with, you can imagine, a lot of overhead, a lot of SG&A, right, loaded on top by all these investments. So that's what I came into. In addition, as I discovered, the mainly under prior ownership, Sears and the spin out, I mean, these were people who came from big boxes, and they had implemented a lot of systems and practices and thinking, policies, procedures that come from that big box world where you have to run it like a giant machine. I mean, it's run like a military operation, like things are very systematized, very controlled. Well, that doesn't lend itself to the feeling of a neighborhood store, right? So it was kind of like the origin of the company and what it had originally meant to people and its reason for being, this neighborly store, right, in the neighborhood, had all this stuff, sort of layered over it, these practices that made it more like a big box, so less differentiated, right, or harder to be differentiated. Standardized merchandising, for example, like very regimented ways of providing service to customers. People in the stores weren't allowed to leave their zone of the store. Well, in a big box, okay, but in a 20,000 square foot store, it's like kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
So so anyway, so what I walked into was there were a lot of investment had been made, a lot of good things had been done, new store design, new formats, but the culture and the practices. So I would say the value prop. Oh, and the go to market had adopted a very sort of high low discounting, way of trying to drive traffic. and it was all centered on the circular. So, the thing in the newspaper that
Yeah,
if anyone
right.
gets a
Yeah, back when
newspaper
we had
anymore,
newspapers.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Back when, so I mean, just think about it. Like all these practices that were just the value proposition was not aligned with the go to market, was not aligned with the
Mhm.
practices and procedures, and the cost structure was really problematic. So that's what I walked
And
into,
so my recollection and all those
which
just
is why I wanted a coach.
yeah. Well, that's a whole other
And you're
conversation.
probably getting,
I
flashbacks
am
and
actually.
PTSD as I talk about this
I'm
because it's all
resisting the
coming
urge
back
to
to
like, yeah, exactly. But one thing I definitely recall from my experience with you back then was your emphasis on people and building a team and building a culture in the midst of all these really hard business, execution kind of problems, right? And
Yeah.
strategy kind of problems. And, your creative renewal company website, your consulting company, you've got a Venn diagram, three
Hmm.
circles together, strategy, execution, and culture. What was your goal culturally in the midst of all that?
Yeah. The good news, the good news about the situation, in a way, was that so many things were either broken, like we had a really hideous website that couldn't be
I
fixed
remember.
anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't fix it in any reasonable time frame. And the ERP was well underway. The leases for the expansion were signed. So there were so many things that were immovable in a short time that the only thing that can move fast and that can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles is people and culture. you know and I had been through enough and had enough experience to know that. So the reason to focus intensely on the people and culture was that's what can transcend these immovable obstacles. It was a culture driven transformation that focused a lot on the development of people and getting people deeply connected to our purpose and our customers, right? In a variety of ways. But, we made tremendous results in a very short period of time. I
Yeah.
mean, in the first year, we improved cash flow $100 million on a $600 million business, expanded gross margin 453 basis points, took our net promoter from under 60 to consistently over 80, which is up
That's
there with
very
Costco and
strong. Yeah.
Nordstrom, and
Yeah.
and on and on. And we did this while restructuring 2 times, reducing hours in the stores, reconfiguring the whole way that we staff stores, and on and on and on, changing the way we went to market. But all those changes were able to happen so quickly because the focus was on people and culture, developing people, teaching them to be self-directing, self-reflecting, self-correcting, self-developing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within a number of frameworks. So back to frameworks, um, with a very clear idea of who Orchard is and what we stand for, what it is that customers value that they get from us, and the principles by which we are going to operate.
What's the leader?
And
What's
uh,
the senior leader's role? The president's role in fostering that kind of culture?
creating the conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is all about indirect work. And by indirect work, I mean creating conditions. So an aspect of creating conditions is being a role model. But I think of role model in a very specific way, which is I am modeling being self-reflective, being self-directing, taking responsibility. Part of our ethos was operating in a non-hierarchical manner. So I'm going to model all those things. I don't want you to model yourself on me.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, be an embodiment of the principles by which we're going to operate. I'm going to demonstrate and hold myself accountable for, if we've defined what is the essence of Orchard and we're going to use that to make all our decisions, I am going to demonstrate that I'm doing that,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we've talked about, we expect everyone to be self reflecting, in everything they do, I'm going to demonstrate that.